Excellent. Hello, team, and welcome to week 3 of the NIL Office Hours. And today we're going to get into contracts. But real quick, let's do some housekeeping. I'm Thomas Rowe, sports performance coach and the co-founder of Blueprint to Blue Chip with Aaron Charles, who is my co-founder as well. Just a real quick introduction, and then we'll get into Coach John, and he'll kind of walk us through contracts. Aaron, want to tell the audience a little bit about yourself, and then I'll have you introduce John.
Sure, I'd love to. So as Thomas shared, I'm the co-founder of Blueprint to Blue Chip. Spent 20 plus years in corporate America as an executive strategist and consultant. And I'm a sports mom. So all these images you see on the screen are my children. So I get to use their name, image, and likeness however I see fit. But that's really what brings me into this space is my children and what I see them going through and making sure that we're well educated. And we are honored to have with us Coach John. He brings a wealth of knowledge, experience as a coach, administrator. We'll let him tell you his background, but we love coming on here for 30 minutes and giving you just, I think, gold that you can use to help you in your NIL. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Coach John.
All right. Good morning, Aaron and Thomas. Thanks again for the introduction and the opportunity to sit down with you both and talk about some great topics when it comes to NIL and revenue sharing. Again, my name is John Bronkhorst. I'm a retired athletic administrator and head coach of 30 years. Coached at the professional college and high school levels during my career. Retired and became a financial professional, where one of my main focuses is on continuing to help student athletes and families kind of navigate this NIL space in revenue sharing. And today's topic is an exciting one because we're going to be talking about contracts today. So I do have a quick disclaimer I have to say. Number one thing, guys, today, I am not an attorney. All right, so nothing discussed today during today's episode should be considered legal advice. The purpose of this episode is education. Athletes and families should seek qualified legal advice when reviewing contracts and agreements. All right, so that's my quick disclaimer. I am not an attorney.
Awesome. Appreciate that, Coach John. All right, team, week 1, we got into NIL 101 and what NIL actually means. Last week, we got into compliance, the rules that protect your eligibility. Today, we're going to get into contracts. Here's the bridge I want every athlete, their family, or coaches in the room to hear. You know the rules, you understand compliance, and then someone puts a contract in front of you and says, sign here. What do you actually do? And that's what today is about, and there's nobody here than Coach John to talk about that. Coach, welcome back. Why do most NIL contract mistakes happen? Is it carelessness, or is it something else?
I think a lot of it is it's because just the excitement that happens. Because what happens is that a contract. If I'm a 17-year-old, 18-year-old athlete, doesn't matter if I'm a football player, volleyball player, whatever, and somebody puts a contract in front of me in my family, and it says I'm getting paid it could possibly constitute to generational money. Okay, that's exciting. And so I want to sign as fast as I can so I can get that check. And so what happens is that a lot of times the patience level of reviewing the contract, taking it back to maybe the family attorney or your agent, who might be a contract attorney, to look it over and make sure that everything in the contract is up to snuff. I guess I think the best way of putting it, and making sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, and that there's nothing funny, there's no red flags inside that contract to look over.
Awesome. Very true. Week 1 is done. Week 2 done. Week 3, here we are with compliance. Each week builds on the last one. If you missed week 1 or 2, the replays are in the chat below. And before we get into contracts specifically, why does understanding compliance from week 2 matter before we talk about contracts today? How do those two things connect, Coach?
Because the things that you agree to could have a direct impact on your eligibility. And so making sure, again, that you know all of the ins and outs of your state association, if you're a high school athlete, of your conference, of your school, those sorts of things, making sure that, again, you have full understanding of compliance before you sign that contract. Because as soon as you sign that contract, you're now going to start becoming compensated for your name, image, and likeness. And that in turn could have negative impacts on your eligibility if that contract violates any sort of eligibility standards on your state or your university.
Gotcha. Compliance tells you what's allowed. Contracts govern how the deal works. You need both. So let's get into it. And before we talk about what to look for in a contract, I want to make sure everyone in the room is on the same page about what a contract actually is. Coach, what actually makes something a binding contract? Because I think a lot of athletes don't realize that the text message that you sent on Instagram saying "I'm in" might already be a contract. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's, depending on the state that you're in, a handshake deal, something written on a napkin, a verbal agreement.
Right.
Those can be all binding agreements that you have chosen as an individual to agree to the terms of that partnership. And so again, you have to be very, very aware of that. You have to scale down the excitement level. I know it's very exciting when you're getting that first NIL deal. All right, I'm excited, but you have to really watch the things how you communicate that. And because again, those things can become binding based on what state you're in. And so, like in the state of Texas, I can write down on a napkin that, I agree to X, Y, and Z. And we both sign that napkin. That's now a binding legal document. I can verbally say something that, hey, we verbally agreed to this. And so those are things that can be put out in front of in a court of law. And so you really want to make sure that you are, again, you're paying attention to how you communicate and be very, very careful on how you communicate those things.
No doubt. Athletes need to be careful even before the formal contract even arrives. So that leads me to, what are the different types of NIL contracts athletes are likely to encounter? Because I don't think most athletes know there's more than one kind.
Oh yeah, I mean you're going to have several. Let's just talk about NIL itself. It could be a contract for service that's paid. You're going to be paid a monetary amount. It could be a contract to be able to use your name, image, and likeness, and in return, you're going to get a car to use. You're going to get an apartment. You're going to get a food agreement. So there are all sorts of agreements out there based on what you're being asked to do, or how they want to use your name, your image, your likeness. And so those things you have to make sure you're aware of it. A lot of times these NIL deals, especially with lower tier universities, they're not monetary. You're exchanging services. You're exchanging your name for food. You're exchanging your name for the use of an apartment or a car. But that's still an NIL agreement. And so those things need to be very careful when you're looking that over and making sure that, you're not getting taken advantage of simply because you're looking at it and say, oh, I'm getting a great car out of this deal to use for my next 4 years, or I get to exchange every 3 months. Making sure that there's not mileage limits. I mean, there's so many things inside these agreements on, how much do you have to put forward yourself? Do I need to be at the car dealership every Tuesday for 3 hours to meet and greet? There are so many things that you need to make sure that you're reading that fine language and that print inside those contracts. Got it.
And some people they'll think, or they'll say, if it's not in writing, it doesn't protect you. How many athletes are still operating on verbal deals, and what's the risk?
Wow, I don't have the exact number of how many verbal, on verbal contracts, but there's a significant risk because it becomes he said, she said.
Sure.
When you're talking about that. And so, the big thing, most athletes get excited about the opportunities. And so they instantly agree, oh yeah, let's do that. That's great. Well, they verbally have agreed. And so everything, my suggestion is before you agree to anything, get it in writing, and then take it to somebody, take to a contract lawyer, take it to an attorney that can look over it and make sure that you're not getting taken advantage of. Because contracts create expectations. Contracts create rights, and sometimes contracts create problems. And so make sure that you have all of that reviewed before you agree verbally, agree by signature, whatever, because they're dangerous. Contracts can be dangerous.
Sure. Got to get it in writing. That's for sure.
Yep.
We've got two sections here coming up, the key terms and the clauses that trap athletes. Walk me through the terms every athlete needs to understand before they sign. And I want you to tell me the one thing within each that athletes most commonly miss. Compensation.
Yeah, I mean, I think
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I think the biggest thing is that, the key terms is what are your responsibilities? Okay, so what are your time commitments that are being required? And then what are the terms of the contract in regards to your financial the financial end, or what services are you getting back for those contracts? So those are some of the early things that you need to make sure that that athletes have a full understanding of what their obligation is for being able to receive that benefit of NIL.
Got it. Auto renewal is one that really gets to me. Athletes sign for 1 year and end up in 2. Those clauses, are they designed to trap athletes?
They're not designed to trap athletes. I think what happens is that what they're trying to do is they're trying to keep. They're mostly designed, in my opinion, to keep athletes from going from one university to the next university to the next university to the next university, and basically try to to get the next best offer. A lot of times they're designed for continuity standpoint. That, hey, we like you, we want to have you for X number of years, and so it's trying to get that commitment level out of those student athletes, so they're not bailing out after 1 year to go after the next best deal.
Gotcha. All right, on the next slide, you're going to walk me through the 4 clauses on the slide, and for each one, give me the real world pattern of how it hurts athletes. We'll get into exclusivity, moral and behavior clauses, that's a big one, intellectual property, and liquidated damages. Let's start with exclusivity.
All right, exclusivity. Exclusivity, basically, it's in regards to your exclusive rights that you cannot go to a competitor. All right, so if you're going to be with a car dealer, I like using car dealerships because it's one of the popular ones. If I'm with the local Ford dealership, okay, I can't go. I'm exclusive to that dealership. I can't go to the other Ford dealership around the corner in my city because they offered me another deal. And so a lot of times you're going to see those exclusivity rights where you're going to be working with us, and you cannot work with somebody in direct competition with us.
Perfect. And how about morality and behavioral clauses?
You see a lot of this, especially when it comes to social media, making sure that if you're going to be held to a certain standard, you're going to be accountable for your words and your actions, and so you can default basically on your agreement if you do not hold up to the moral standards of what the contract says, by the words that you use, the things that you post, your actions in public when you're representing that company. And so a contract can become null and void in agreement if you do not fulfill those moral obligations set forth in that contract.
Gotcha. Let's get into intellectual property.
Yeah, intellectual property, and so a lot of times you'll have agreements set up to where the company that is providing this, that is basically is paying you, have all rights of that property, and so you're not allowed to take it with you and use it with another company. They reserve the rights of that intellectual property, and so again, you got to make sure that when you're reading these contracts through, that you have a full understanding of what those sections are and where they can benefit you and where you can also be taken advantage of, because you want to be able to hold your own rights. You don't want those rights being taken by another company where they can use you your ideas, your image, or whatever exclusively just for them. You want to be able to hold on to your again, your name, image, and likeness. You want to be able to move on to different groups and no one own that exclusivity. So you have to be very careful on that.
Very cool. Got it. What about liquidated damages? That seems to be one that'll sneak up on you.
Yeah, those things you have to make sure that you're taking care of, and that you have all understanding that, if there's a, if you decide to transfer schools, or if you have money left on your contract and you decide you're going to transfer, what those, what do you owe? And so you see a lot of those, those things happening right now. It's these universities take a pretty heavy negative toll, on through the media and social media, because I have Johnny quarterback who decides that he wants to leave for another school, but yet he still has $3 million left on his NIL deal with us, and in his contract it states that, hey, if you transfer schools before this contract's up, you owe us X number of dollars. And so you want to make sure that language is clear on what the expectations are. And there's a kind of a give and take in regards to, I love having this, this opportunity, but do I want that opportunity for 2 years? Do I want that opportunity, or do I want it renewable every year? Because if I sign something for 2 years, that means I'm locked in. And if there is a better deal for me out there, and I want to transfer to a different school because I have a better opportunity from going pro or whatever, and it's going to be better for my career, I don't want to have to pay money back to my other university because I transferred schools. And so you want to make sure that all that language is properly vetted out before you sign that contract. Very cool.
Aaron, you've been listening here for some time, and I want to get into the character standpoint. And before we move on, what's the character layer underneath contract decisions that athletes are missing?
I would say you need to be really anchored in who you are and what you want. So just because it sounds great may not be great for you. And so you've got to be anchored in yourself so you know what you want. And that's a good starting point. And we had a great guest on, and then I'm going to turn it over to you, Sean Boone, who played at North Carolina State, the Wolfpack, and then he went on. But he had a great expression, like, what is your family's, especially for these younger athletes, what's your standard operating procedure as a family? What are the things that are a must and are deal killers? And you've got to be willing to walk away if it doesn't align with you. And so this is about you knowing who you are, what you want, and you're going to negotiate, which I think is your next slide, but you've got to then be willing to walk away if it doesn't fit what you want.
Mm-hmm. I agree 100% to that, Aaron. That is a great point. Great point.
That's so true. Know who you are before you sign. And if you see any of these red flags, team, just walk away. No written contract, pressure to sign immediately, language you can't understand, or no exit clause, slow down or walk away. John, standard contracts is something I hear all the time. This is our standard contract. Implies it's not negotiable. Is that true? And if not, what is actually negotiable in an NIL contract?
Yeah, I think there are, you do have your standard contracts out there, and those are generally speaking, those are going to be your lower tiered opportunities, and then when you start getting into more of those larger universities where these are getting more complex, you have a lot more complex contracts in regards to what these student athletes are agreeing to. And so, that's the big thing, is that the more elaborate your deal is, the more elaborate that contract is going to be, and why it's even more important that you have an advisor with you, or you take it to an advisor that can look over that language, because you have some that are very cut and dry. You want to make sure that how long does that agreement last? Is it one event? Is it 1 month? Is it one season? Is it a year? Is it multiple years? So you don't want to overlook the duration of that contract. What rights are you giving away? And so, things like that, like we talked about, is there exclusivity? How does the contract end? Those are the things that you want to look through. And the more, and so some of those things are standard in contracts. Some of them are not so standard in contracts. So you want to make sure that you have those things put into your contract. You want to make sure everything is clear and concise to what you're agreeing to. You can't just look at the dollar amount. You have to look at what you're giving up for that.
Sure. As somebody who's a little seasoned, like the three of us on this panel right now, you always hear anything's negotiable, right? When you go in, let's say you're looking at a car and they're like, this is the firm price, but and not to play games, but it seems like anything is negotiable. But most athletes have never negotiated anything in their life. They're 19 or 20 years old, and a brand is putting a contract in front of them. How do they negotiate without blowing the deal?
I think that's where having a professional with you. I mean, I don't recommend at all that family, student athletes, and parents do the negotiation on their own.
Sure.
Especially if you're talking about an opportunity that's pretty significant, making sure you have an agent advisor with you, an attorney, a contract attorney, somebody that's going to have your best interests at heart. Because listen, we've all been around, like I said, we're seasoned people. We've all been around the contract negotiating phases. Okay. Contracts are negotiated for a reason, because there's give and take, and the people who are giving you the contract, if you want, we want to think the best out of everybody, but sometimes there are unscrupulous people out there who want to take advantage and try to get the upper hand. And so you have people out there who are, they look at this, say, hey, here's an opportunity to take advantage of a 20-year-old by throwing a large amount at them. Their parents aren't going to know the difference, blah, blah, blah. And so you're going to run into those people, and you have no idea what you're agreeing to. You have no idea how long they own your rights. And so you want to be very, very careful on those things. And that's why it's really important to have an advisor with you to look over, those contracts and make sure your best interest is being had.
No question. And being willing to walk away. I mean, that's leverage, right?
Yes. Being willing to walk away.
Yep. When things go wrong, despite a good contract, even a well-negotiated contract run into some problems or speed bumps. First, what if the brand doesn't pay? What does the athlete do?
Yeah, I mean, that's where you have to make sure, what is your legal recourse if you provide the service and then there's a failure of payment. And so you want to make sure that those things are negotiated in that contract, because those are real,
right.
And so you want to make sure, again, I know it's like hitting the repeat button, having somebody in your camp that knows what to look for. But those things, if you don't have that person in your camp, it's important to understand that you look through the fine that fine print. Make sure that there's an out. Make sure that if they don't pay, what's your recourse to get that payment?
Yeah.
And also, they're going to have, because I promise you, they're going to build into the contract what happens if you don't fulfill your end of the bargain. How are they going to get their money back? It's just like I said, if I have a 2-year contract, if I sign a 2-year contract, I'm getting paid $5 million, and then I decide to up and transfer after year 1. What do I owe that? What do I owe that collector or that NIL agreement back?
Sure.
And so those things, I promise you, that's built into the contract. Okay.
Absolutely.
So make sure you're reading that fine language.
Yep. And that's exactly where I was going with the next scenario. The athlete breaches, they missed a deliverable, or even posted for a competitor. The morality clause got triggered. What do they do now?
Now it just comes down to how aggressive does that firm want to get with you? And so what can you do to make it right? I mean, you literally violated the terms of the contract. They can eliminate it. They can just take it away. If there's a fine built into it, or if there's hey, you have to repay us X amount of dollars. And so it's extremely important that if you're going to sign the agreement, to understand what the moral clause is, what your responsibilities are, and then what happens if I do break the terms of that contract. And so you have to be aware of all the language involved in that. because it can cost you if you get greedy or if you get lazy and do something thinking, oh, no one's going to find out if I do this. And then boom, it's out on. Well, these kids don't realize how visual they are.
Yep.
And so everybody knows everything.
Last question on this slide. What about getting out of a bad deal entirely? Is that possible?
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely get out of a bad deal, but that's going to be, again, come into the language of the contract, that you need to make sure that you negotiate that language, that if this, if they begin to ask things of you that go against what you believe in or could possibly, violate your eligibility, this is when I can walk away. How do I walk away? What does that look like? So make sure, again, that language is built into that. It goes back to that question we had a little while ago: standard agreement versus non-standard agreements. That's where the bigger these deals get, the more complex these deals get. That's where you start seeing that language in those contracts. It's easy that if I'm just, if I'm just exchanging my name, image, and likeness for free meals at the local restaurant establishment, that's a pretty easy deal.
Yeah.
You're not going to, there's not going to be a lot tied into that. But when you're starting to exchange real dollars and you're exchanging 6-figure checks and that sort of thing, and that becomes a big time marketing plan, that's where the language starts getting complex in those agreements. And you need to make sure that you're aware of where your rights are as a participant in it.
For sure. Get legal help before you do anything drastic is the simple rule of thumb. All right, let's get into the checklist. This is where I'm going to turn it over to John. He has 10 questions. Before you sign anything, let's go ahead and walk us through them. And I want you to tell me which one athletes skip most often.
All right. So the first one is, that I have is, who are the parties? Okay. Who's involved? Athlete, business, collective, school, agent, marketing company. Athletes should know exactly who they are doing business with. All right. So make sure, what am I required to do? Is it social media posts, appearances, camps, autographs, commercials, interviews, promotions, content creation? Never assume expectations. Understand expectations. Next, how am I getting paid? Questions that athletes should ask: how much? When? Is it a lump sum? Is it monthly? Am I getting performance bonuses, incentives? So never assume payment terms. Understand payment terms. Next, we talked about it a second ago. How long does that agreement last? Is it a one event thing, monthly, a season, a year, multiple years? A lot of athletes overlook the contract duration. Next question: what rights am I giving away? This is where things become serious. So possible rights include your name, your image, and your likeness, photos, videos, social media content, promotional materials. Athletes focus on the money. Professionals focus on their rights. So be a professional when it comes to this. Is there exclusivity? Can I work with competing brands? Can I sign additional NIL deals? Are there restrictions? You must understand your exclusivity clauses. How does the contract end? Can I terminate? Can they terminate? What happens if obligations are not met? Every athlete should understand their exit strategy before entering the agreement. Mm-hmm. Those are your main questions that you need to ask before you do anything when it comes to these contracts. That's your checklist. And then I have there are a number of red flags in that checklist. Pressure, we talked about a few minutes ago, pressure to sign immediately. All right, that's a major red flag. Sign today or lose the deal.
Right.
Slow down. If you get that, that's something you want to walk away from. Promises not in writing. If it's important, it should be in writing. Handshake promises don't help if there's a disagreement. Vague expectations, unclear expectations create future problems. Everything should be clearly defined. If there are no discussions about taxes, someone should explain tax responsibilities. NIL income may create tax obligations. And then lastly, nobody reviewed the contract. Parents, attorney, advisor, someone. Never be afraid to seek another opinion. Those things are vitally important as you're going through this checklist before you put your name on that dotted line.
Love it. Love it. John, we got a couple of questions from that have come in from our audience over the week. I signed a contract 6 months ago, and I just realized it has a perpetual IP clause. The campaign is over, but they're still using my image. What recourse do I have?
Yeah, it's going to be the language of the contract, essentially. You know, were there terms put in and how long they could use that? So make sure you go back through and read that contract for that filing. If there is stipulation there that once the agreement's done and everything's paid out, that there's no longer use of your image, what recourse do you have? Make sure that that's in that contract. Make sure you understand what that is, and then go after them. And you know, it may come down to a cease and desist. You know,
Sure.
The big thing though is before you go into those things, just reach out to the company and say, hey, I see that you're still using my image. Our agreement's over with. If you want to continue, we can continue this agreement. But if you're not going to continue, then I ask that you stop using my name, my image. And if they refuse, that's where you get that cease and desist order, and you have to move into the legal realm.
Gotcha. As we wrap up here, Coach, one sentence. What do you want every athlete, family, or coach in the room to remember about today?
Yeah, before signing any agreement, ask yourself these questions. Do I understand what I'm agreeing to? Do I understand what rights I'm giving away? Have I asked enough questions? And have I had someone I trust review this? Because remember, the signature is the easiest part. Understanding what you're signing is the hardest part.
Right.
Do your homework. Don't fall in love with the dollar sign, because as soon as you sign your name on that dotted line, they own you.
Awesome. Well, Coach, team, that's it. That's the whole lesson. Coach, we're going to see you next week. I know that you have a surgery coming up, so Aaron and I wish you the best. I know you're going to have that knee worked on. That's week 3. Coach, where can people get a hold of you?
So you can reach out to me again on LinkedIn, John Bronkhorst. You can email me, john.bronkhorst@cwsplanning.com. You can follow me on Twitter @Coach Bronk. And so those are the areas. And then cwsplanning.com for Capital Wealth Strategies, my firm. And so again, I'm always available. Reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to sit down with you and your family to answer any questions that you have.
Awesome. Thanks, Coach. Team, next week we're going to get into taxes. If this one didn't stimulate you, today's tax is really going to get you going.
Yeah.
NIL income is taxable, all of it. Cash, products, services, gift cards. The IRS treats it all like business income, and Coach is going to get into it, dotting the I's and crossing the T's. Most athletes have no idea what that means and what to do about it. Register right now in the chat. Sign up, and then we'll see you next week. Same time, same place, just a half hour of your time. One topic, real answers on taxes. Coach, thank you so much. Aaron, thank you for everything you do. Team, we'll see you next week.